Welcome back to This is Van Color. My name is Mo Amir, and our featured guest is an award-winning and influential investigative journalist for Global News. His book, Willful Blindness: How a Network of Narcos, Tycoons, and CCP Agents Infiltrated the West, was released last year to critical acclaim, and it is an absolute jaw-dropper that will infuriate you. He's been following British Columbia's public inquiry into money laundering, the Cullen Commission, a commission that exists in large part due to his hard work. He is Sam Cooper. Sam, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Mo.
Sam, we know that money laundering is a big problem in British Columbia with far-reaching consequences surrounding crime, the drug trade, the real estate industry, foreign interference. But when it comes to the Cullen Commission, what were the big revelations? What did we learn?
For me, the big revelations were we knew there were big problems here. We didn't know the exact scale, and we didn't know really how high the warnings about this activity went. And we learned that in detail in the inquiry. We heard about meetings between casino floor investigators and their bosses in which the investigators had tried to intervene in these transactions of hockey bags of cash, and they were told by their bosses not to because their bosses were getting pressure from the casino owners who said they didn't want the revenue that was being delivered through these high stakes gamblers to be disrupted. We heard about warnings that went all the way up to the minister's office, the gaming minister's office, that this suspected drug money laundering was growing exponentially. It was estimated by 2014 to reach 200 million in suspected drug cash transactions per year, and the government didn't do anything. We learned more about exactly who these VIP gamblers were that are acting in what we now know as the Vancouver model. Mo, as you know, that's ultra wealthy people from China flying into Vancouver. They are met outside a casino with a gangster loan shark who gives them a bag of cash. The casinos did not stop this activity. In fact, we learned that investigators warned their bosses these gamblers, the high stakes, high rollers, were suspected international drug traffickers. And we also heard the motive was revenue. The government and the casinos didn't want that flow of cash to stop.
So if we know that crimes were committed and potentially there was dereliction of duty, negligence, maybe even complicity from officials in the BC government, how come we haven't seen any arrests or major political fallout as a result of the commission then?
Well, the terms of the commission and its mandate are it's mandated to find, was there inaction or corruption that allowed this egregious, very clear money laundering activity to occur in casinos. The terms specifically say that it should not directly lead to criminal investigations. I believe the reason is they want witnesses to be fulsome in their evidence. But look, Mo, what your question is, why is anyone not in jail? Another thing that I learned that had never come out, there were police investigations that directly targeted the casinos themselves. We've never heard that. I found documents that said Richmond's River Rock Casino had specifically built its high roller salons to invite gamblers from China in who were used by the casinos as willing pawns in very significant money laundering activity. Mo, just think back to we had an independent review into money laundering before the Cullen Commission, which found casinos were unwitting victims. However, the commission, through documents, revealed the opposite. The RCMP believed the casinos were wittingly involved in this money laundering.
Now, Sam, correct me if I'm wrong. The Cullen Commission is called the Inquiry into Money Laundering in British Columbia, but the scope seemed limited to BC casinos. Why was real estate excluded from the inquiry when we know that this asset class in particular was utilized to launder money in Metro Vancouver to what I and probably many others believe to be a detrimental effect?
I think you're exactly right. I give credit to the Cullen Commission for thoroughly examining was there inaction in terms of these warnings about suspected drug money laundering that government officials completely ignored. And yet we know that casinos are the tip of the iceberg of real estate activity. And furthermore, we know that many of these VIP gamblers, suspected international drug traffickers, were also big-time real estate developers in the province. And you're right. I know that because I can dig into the records, but it never came out in testimony in the commission. There were case studies sort of buried in the documents that said their financial entities in Hong Kong were sending tens of millions of dollars into BC bank accounts, and through corruption suspects from foreign countries, this made it into Vancouver mansions. And, you're right. That didn't come out in the inquiry. I think the inquiry leaves itself open to accusations that that's a gap that they didn't examine. I'll add one more thing. Sure. Mo, in my book, I write about how Hong Kong tycoons that are deeply, they run the Macau casinos, which are at the root of this Vancouver model of transaction. They were huge buyers of land in Vancouver in the 1990s. Big time developers, their projects still continue to roll in Vancouver today and send money around the world. We never really heard about the names of these people who my book, I report, I have the documents that show some of these tycoons are organized crime suspects.
Sure. Now, in so much reporting about what was happening in BC casinos, the name Rich Coleman, BC's former deputy premier, keeps coming up. He testified and then he was recalled to testify due to the media picking up on inconsistencies in his original testimony. Is there evidence to suggest that Mr. Coleman was willfully blind to money laundering activities in BC casinos?
In my view, I think there is. We can just lay it out like this. I spoke of a face-to-face meeting in 2010 between a gaming regulator boss and Mr. Coleman, in which Mr. Coleman was warned. This is suspected drug money laundering of warehouses of cash in Vancouver, and the government needs to crack down on this flow of $20 bills coming in. The evidence is that Mr. Coleman remembered that meeting, but he didn't do anything. And furthermore, in his evidence, he said we didn't have real proof that this was money laundering. We can jump to another a meeting or emails that were testified about Mr. Coleman and his colleagues in the government received from casino whistleblowers, that is, people inside a casino that said loan sharking is allowed by managers, crime is infiltrating casinos. And again, we heard that Mr. Coleman and his colleagues didn't respond to these warnings with significant investigations. And on top of that, Mo, you spoke about Mr. Coleman being recalled about his testimony. He was asked when an RCMP officer came out in 2011 and said, this is stinky, this is mystery money, this is suspected money laundering. We know that Mr. Coleman came out on CBC and said, actually, his bosses disagree with him. This is not money laundering. So Mr. Coleman cracked down on the RCMP officer that was involved in this investigation I spoke earlier, in which River Rock Casino was targeted. Why would Mr. Coleman come out and try to silence this RCMP officer? And why in his testimony would he say, actually, I didn't comment anything, and have to be recalled and say, yes, I did say something, but there was no real nefarious intent, I believe was his testimony.
I mean, I could take a guess at answering that question, but I'd probably get in trouble, so I'll pass on that. Sam, is there any evidence to show that money is still being laundered in large sums through BC casinos at present?
In the hearings we heard, there are still suspicious transactions of 10,000. I've heard from sources 20,000, perhaps even up to 30,000. Money laundering is still occurring. Don't get it wrong. But what is not occurring is these bags with $200,000 in 20s, $500,000, up to $1 million coming from known high-level organized crime suspects with connections to Hong Kong, China, and Macau. Look, this evidence is on videotape that the casinos, the BC's government, the RCMP, the regulator, all knew. The people involved, that is people delivering the cash and the high-stakes gamblers, were connected to drug trafficking investigations. That activity is not as brazen anymore, Mo, but the drug dealing behind it and illegal casino activity, other forms of crime are rampant in British Columbia. Organized crime is very fluid, very adaptable. And so, yes, they're not delivering bales of cash anymore, but they're going to other means.
Well, hey, Sam, I appreciate your time. We are going to chat a little more about the Cullen Commission on the podcast version, but thank you for this and keep up the good work, my friend.
Thank you, Mo.
Folks, for the full chat with Sam Cooper, find This Is Van Color wherever you listen to your podcasts. And of course, make sure you pick up his book, Willful Blindness: How a Network of Narcos, Tycoons, and CCP Agents Infiltrated the West. Investigative journalist extraordinaire, he is Sam Cooper. Now stick around, because after some business, I'm going to talk about how being nice is not all it's cracked up to be. After the break, we're going to take a moment. My name is Mo Amir. This is Van Color.